Yeah. Okay, cool.
Cool. Yeah, none of the links are working for me.
Those links weren't in Zoom anymore.
Okay.
So somehow they must have gotten deleted. So I just created a new one.
No worries.
So these will be the new ones. All right. So should we jump in? Should we give it a minute here? Let people kind of come in.
Let's give it a minute for people to jump on.
What's up, Richard? Richard, I'm doing my absolute best to get out to Ibiza in June. My absolute best.
This June? Or this upcoming June?
This upcoming June. The June, yeah. The June that's coming.
For the wedding. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Cool.
Got some things we still need to figure out, but yeah, I really, really want to make it happen.
Sure.
All right, cool. So June is goof. Let me just make sure my system. Okay, cool. So yeah, as you guys kind of saw from the headline and from the sub-headline here, there's something happened this weekend. I actually was doing some research before we got on here just to kind of see how it all got started, because all of a sudden, I'm sure you guys who are on Facebook have seen that your entire news feed this morning was probably filled with hashtag #MeToo. And you're probably pretty curious what that was all about. And it's really, really incredible. And I was actually just doing some research. So it started with, of all people, Alyssa Milano. And Alyssa Milano had posted asking women to kind of help her start this movement where the concept is that women who've been abused in any way, shape, or form, whether physically or mentally, are coming out and saying that, you know, they too have been abused. And something interesting that I just read, it was pretty much only women, which I actually found to be really interesting. And I'll just throw this in there because Guy and I, we've been coaching for so long, probably like over a decade we've been coaching. And I can tell you from my personal experience as a coach, one of the most shocking things, and Guy, I'm sure you can concur, one of the most shocking things was how many human beings, not women, like in my head, I always assumed that, you know, more women were abused. I don't know that to honestly be true. You know, whether it's us coaching, whether it's our live events, I promise you that just as many men have been, whether it's mentally abused or sexually abused. I mean, it got to a point where the stories stopped to shock me the way that they used to, because it is so predominant. Bro, you read a stat somewhere at one point about like how many people have been abused, and it was, do you remember?
I don't. I mean, like, I don't want to weigh, you know, who's got it worse, women or men. I think.
No. I'm not saying from that perspective.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like human.
I don't remember. I mean, like my experience has been that. I mean, I'm balling it through my own experiences. Like, I would say 50 to 60% of people I worked with in some way, shape, or form have had some kind of sexual or otherwise abuse.
Yeah. The statistics are shocking. So when I was watching all these Me Too's come in, it wasn't a surprise, you know, and then somebody else, so someone was saying like, you know, it's shocking that men aren't chiming in. And I think that probably comes from the fact that it really is stemmed as a women thing. And I think like if a man was like hashtag Me Too, then there'll probably be a whole bunch of women that might get upset by it. So another hashtag got created, and that hashtag is iWill. And that is more for the action steps that other people are going to be taking on in response to what they are finding out. And so I'd love for us, all of us, and, you know, for you guys who are watching this right now, you know, I'm very, very interested to hear your comments and how you've been taking this news and what's come up for you. And I think it's timely to have a conversation around abuse, on kind of both sides of the coin, you know, whether you're someone who's been abused, or whether you know someone or someone in your life is a person that's been abused. And yeah, just share openly about some of the things that we've noticed as we've been going through our journey, and some of the conversations that we've been able to have with people. And so I'll just kind of kick it off with this, bro, and then I'll let you take it from there. You know, one of the things that I find to be most shocking about this whole thing of abuse is the shame and guilt that the person who was abused feels and carries, and how broken they feel, and how because of it they're just in a constant state of hiding, and what a trauma that actually causes in people's lives. And I'm not at liberty to share with you some of the stories that we've heard. You know, Audrey was at our last live event. There are a few other people there. Like, you know, there's a good span of 4, probably more hours on day 2 where people shared some of the most incredible stories I've ever heard human beings go through. And there's something to be said that when someone shares that thing, and that's why I love this movement, and I really hope that this seed kind of blossoms into something great, because it's one thing to come out there and say, you know, me too, and that's an amazing first step. It's a whole other catharsis experience to actually be in a safe enough environment to share that, you know, trauma with someone who can listen, not in a way of offering pity or, you know, offering agreement to how terrible that person was for doing X, Y, and Z. Rather listen from a place of love and acceptance and support. And I think, you know, for our side of Satori Prime, you know, hashtag iWill, it's always been to offer listening, to offer acceptance, support, and love to everything that someone is going through. And if we'll give you guys some tips today on how you can kind of create that in your own life. So with that, I'd just love to hear from you, bro. You know, what's your take been, and what's been coming up for you out of this whole thing? And guys that are here with us live, I would love if in the comment box you guys shared as well what was coming up for you.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting exploration for me too. This is a subject that for me has been sensitive for a while. Like, you know, I live in a place where I think people will consider themselves conscious, and yet I know here it's I don't want to say rampant problem. That's probably making it bigger than it is, but it's definitely a problem with boundaries being crossed and stuff like that. About a year ago, we have a pretty sizable group here for this area, like a Facebook group that has roughly 3,000 people in it, so vast. And I had heard about some situations here with women and men, and again, like, you know, not liberty to give particulars, but I made a really big stink about it, and I made a very aggressive post about it, and that post had like 400 comments in that group. Like, it just kept going to the top of the group because people would comment on it, bounce back up, and it created this conversation for like 2 months, and it created a lot of conversation groups out here of how to properly approach these situations, and a lot of relationship coaches give feedback. So I think what you said, secondly, I think is the most important part. I don't pretend that we can create a utopian world, no matter how good things get. And I really do think this is the best time in human history, regardless of what the news says, to be alive as a human being. It's never been safer to be a human being. This has been a pattern in humanity for a long time. It's just with women getting a voice, it's finally getting a voice. I think a mistake is to turn it into a witch hunt. I think a mistake is to start being distrustful of all men.
Yes.
Of relationships, of women being able to feel safe, and women have the right to feel safe. So I prefer not to see turn into witch hunt, which I think so often happens when you turn things into like a mob type of mentality. More than anything, I would love for space to be created. So I was sitting around the kitchen with two of my friends yesterday, and I brought this up and I said, with everything that's happening in Hollywood and we see these power players constantly in these situations, misogyny, Donald Trump, like the whole thing. I'm like, why do you guys think it is that, like we're in a situation right now where we have stuff like that happening here? I'm like, why do you think that women don't get together? Because we have patriarchal societies, we have matriarchal societies, and there's certain societies in the world where it's a matriarchal society, and if stuff like this is going on, like the man is ousted from the community essentially, which is like his breath, obviously. I said, how come you don't find that happening here? And they kind of started giving me some perspective from the women's side about like the shame that happens, and when that comes out, that oftentimes the person who's bringing the truth to the surface is the one that gets ostracized. Because of like certain social dynamics. So I think that's kind of where I would want to see the shift happen, where there would be like a sense of safety for people to come forward without that blurry line to be there. It's really interesting how the mind in situations like these, and situations like when people are held captive and Stockholm syndrome, that like the blame is internalized and it's just like a matter of like self-preservation. And how that would need to shift for this to become, I think, transformed in a new way. So that's there for me. The other thing that's interesting for me is I know like what you had just mentioned, and situations that we've had with like training that we went to in Italy a few years back, that one of the things that was really striking to me when we were learning about certain things like this is like that most people in their relationship to the opposite sex, men look at women like they're less hairy men, women look at men like they're more hair, whatever it is. One has more hair, one has less hair. I don't remember which way I said it right now. The point is that like I remember what struck me a lot was when we started sharing about puberty between men and women, and like men sharing about puberty and women sharing puberty, and how much we don't know, not just about like what other people's experiences were during that time when you were like, kind of going through your sexual renaissance, your sexual revolution, but how little the sexes know about what was really going on for there, and how much shame we carry around from all that kind of stuff, and the make wrongs and the developmental processes that we carry around with us for the rest of our lives. So I think what it comes down to is like everything else in this world. It's like when there's open and honest and authentic communication about something, it comes into the consciousness where I worry is that people now get timid, and that it turns into this like big litigious thing where suddenly it's like, everywhere you go, like men are, being ostracized and men are being taken to court, and it just becomes like a giant fucking witch hunt. And I think that's like the shadowy part of it. I'm happy the conversation's here, and I hope like most things that it's not just a passing phase, but it becomes something that we can actively participate in having conversations about and looking at new ways of operation. I think for a lot of men, especially older men, I don't know if it's an excuse to say, I don't know. I think like the Weinstein thing is total garbage. Like, oh, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. Like, I don't know. Okay, well, you had 30 years to figure it out since then. There was a little bit of buffer time for you. And yeah, I think the fascinating part is like how many people can know about a situation like that and just be like, well, that's Harvey being Harvey, and just kind of let that be the way of it. Like, we can't do anything about it. Where we can organize and we can have conversations and say, okay, well, what are we going to do about this situation?
Yeah. So a couple of things came up as you were talking. One, for those of you, look, at the end of the day, here's the conversation to be had. This is a relationship, right? And one's relationship to, I'm not even going to say to women, I'm just going to say to another human being. Like, the way you relate to other human beings is what allows you to do or not do certain things to that human being, right? So when you realize that you are that person, whether it's a man or a woman, and you've been on all sides of it, so one of the books that I've absolutely loved, and both the guy and I have ranted and raved about, is a book called Journey of Souls. And look, I mean, I don't know what your beliefs are about how the world works and all that stuff, but just real quick, Journey of Souls is a study done by a doctor who didn't believe in any of this soul stuff, by the way, that started reverse hypnosis people, regression hypnosis people, but into their previous like memories, And then all of a sudden they went into previous lives, and then he started doing this work where he would follow a soul through its path, leaving the body and then back into the body. So like what happens during that time when we die? Just mind expanding beyond most books that I've ever read. And one of the things he talks about is this book, and also Awaken the Species, which is Conversations with God, book 4, is all about how we have chosen to come into this physical world, in this physical body, at this specific time, with this specific environment, etc., to have a physical experience for our soul's growth and development as individuals and as all souls, right? So you come here and you're the rapee and the raper. You're the killer and the killed. You're the black and the white, the young and the old, the Muslim and the Jewish. You're all of it, and you choose into it at any given time line, right, to experience something. With that being said, if you knew that, right, like at one point you were on the other side of that equation, whatever the equation might be. And that's a fascinating thing to just think about, because in that, for me, at least what I pull from that is a level of empathy and a level of compassion for what someone else is going through, because I realize that whatever life path you've chosen for yourself, you've chosen for a very specific reason. And the journey that you have chosen to go on this time around, that I can visually see or hear, right? You've chosen that. And so it all stems from how you relate to another human being, how you relate to even like animals, right? Like people have different relationships to animals. Like people feel so much empathy for animals that they can't even eat them, right? Like I love animals and I'm okay with eating animals, right? So like there's different levels of that. So with that being said, you know, when we're talking specifically about women, think about where all of our, you know, like 95% of your programming about how you operate as a human being were created between the time you were 2 to say 7 years old, right? You can create some other ones along the way, but like that's the predominant program that you have. Where are you during that time? In a home, right? Like for the majority of us living in the, you know, the new world, quote unquote, we were at home with our parents from that time. Now, here's the thing. The way your father, for men, the way your father you saw and witnessed and made up stories about how he related to your mother, that gives you a lot of guidance about how you're going to relate to your mom, right? So that creates a whole construct. Now, if you didn't happen to have a father, right, there's a whole other thing around that. I posted this amazing video. If you go to my page, there's an amazing video about inequality in this country. This guy does the most amazing project where he has like a bunch of kids, high school kids, just stand in a line and they race for, did you see this video?
No, I didn't.
Oh my God, it's so genius. So he holds a $100 bill. He's like, we're going to race. Whoever wins gets a $100 bill. But before we go, I'm just going to read off these things. And if this applies to you, I want you to take 2 giant steps forward. And he's like, you had both parents while you were growing up. You know, people walk. You never had to worry about when a meal was coming from. Boom, boom, boom. Like you never had to worry about clothes on your back. Boom, boom, boom. Like things that we all kind of take for granted. And guess what? At the end of guess who was at the back of the line? All the black people and the minorities. Right? And we're talking about race and all these things. And I'm like, we all have been given advantage. So anyway, your relationship to how you are with your mom creates a certain construct of what is okay and not okay around women, right? Now, I have a 6-year-old son and a 4.5-year-old daughter. Guess what they're watching at all times? Not what I'm saying. They're watching how I am with their mom. Shia is watching at every given second how I am with my daughter, how I am with other women in my life, and that gives him a construct of what is okay and not okay, what is respectful and loving and accepting, and what is not. And so a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with is, look, people only do this is going to sound nuts to some of you guys, and I've said it before, like, you can only do the best that you can do with the information you have at hand at any given moment. And so people generally, and Guy, attest to this as well, like people that we coach, right? When someone's been abused in any way, shape, or form, mentally, physically, whatever, what's one of the first questions we ask, right? What was their parent like?
Mm-hmm.
And 99% of the time, their parent was exactly the same way.
Usually worse.
Yeah, usually worse. Exactly. Like it's not shocking how this happens, right? So with that being said, that doesn't make it okay, right? And so I want to just go back to, and this is, bro, I'd love for you to speak about this, is like, you know, we've created an ability where people that have been hurt find it very safe to share incredible things with us, right? Like we sometimes, like, strangers will come up to us and share stories with me, and I'm like, I used to be so shocked by it. Now I'm like, look, it's just the space that we've created, right? That they can be who they are. So I'd love for you to talk about, you know, in like the hashtag of iWill, how to create that kind of space so that the loved ones in your life have this ability to communicate this and release it and receive that love and acceptance and know that they're not broken or there's something wrong with them and can go out and do amazing, great things in the world.
So let me ask you a question. So Me Too, I read last night. I haven't been on social media at all today. It seems like it's shifted to iWill. What's iWill? Like some action someone will take?
So iWill is like what men are now using as like, this is what I will do.
Great. Okay. Well, if we kind of look at the biological build of men and women, right? So women, well, like we all seek safety. If you even think about like why we all want to receive money, it's just a measure of safety, right? Mm-hmm. So we're all seeking to feel safe and not this anxiety that we feel inside. Women, because of their physical stature, create safety by creating partnerships and community, right? Men.
Do you remember, by the way, in Alison Armstrong? Do you remember that piece?
That she talks about that?
That was like one of the most mind-bending things for me.
Oh, like how threatened women feel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true, right? Like there's just a different matter of safety that most men don't deal with as often as women deal with all the time. I also often think that about minorities, like, you know, and I'll just call myself out on it. Like if I'm walking through Harlem or I'm in an all minority type of neighborhood, like I'm on high alert, I'm anxious, I don't know where I am, I don't feel safe. I think to myself, that's how minorities probably feel all the time, right? Like they're out in this like white world, and it's like, you know, history has shown that they're not going to be treated as fairly or as well. So to me, I remember getting that in and being like, oh my God, like, what is that going to be like? And I think that's what empathy breeds. So for men, because of our physical stature and prowess, it's like brute strength is what makes us feel safe, right? You also notice as men usually age and testosterone kind of drops off the cliff, that men go start building communities also. So it's always kind of given me pause to be like, oh, that's interesting, right? Because it's still that same, like, you know, innate thing that we're all seeking. So I think like, yeah, so with the iWill, I'm all for that, because what we're saying is I will be an ear for this conversation. I'm the space for where it's okay to be talking about this. For me, that's where transformation is going to happen. And I mentioned it before, but I'll just mention it again. Like, it's about us stopping to shame this and making it like a shadowy area that we don't get to talk about. Yes. I imagine in many families, like everything that a human is could be, I don't want to say should be, but could be on the table for us to communicate about, including murder and gun violence, especially in America, and all these other things, and drugs and all these things, that the only reason people don't get help is because we talk about it. Like if you do that, you are a submortal type of human. And then it's like when people are in trouble, they don't know where to go because they don't know how to communicate what they need to communicate. And I think in every area of life where things aren't working, it's just a matter of that. So, you know, like there are things that are shifting all the time. Spirituality is a great example. A lot of stuff that was really strange to talk about 10, even 20 years ago, today is like totally commonplace to be talking about manifestation and attracting things to yourself, and yoga. Like, you would have talked about that stuff in the 90s, people would have looked at you like you had three eyes, which technically you do, by the way. And today it's like, that's in the ethos as like a general consensus for, at least how a lot of people are perceiving the world. And I think that that's what we need to start doing is because of the political structure, because of what we see in the news all the time, it's like we constantly use shame, blame, and guilt on ourselves, on everything around us. That's not the way it's supposed to be. We have this really hypocritical nature of like, I'm not that way, you must be that way, and it must be wrong.
Yes.
Guys, the stuff that you make other people wrong for is a stuff that you haven't dealt with yourself personally. It's a stuff that you haven't actually come to surrender and accept that, yeah, you have that too. Like murderous tendencies, white privilege, all these things that people are so upset about, given the right circumstance, you would be exactly like those people. All of us are guilty of killing, whether it's an ant, a fly, or something else. Energy is energy. You killed energy. You're a murderer in your own right. If the circumstances were right, you'd be homeless. If the circumstances were right, you wouldn't be educated. If the circumstances were right, you wouldn't have money. You can't judge, or you can, we could say that there would be a new way of looking at the world, saying that we are all those things. And that's what being one means. It's like everything that a human could be, you are inside of you. And you either have dealt with it, healed it, and completed it, or you haven't. And the things that you haven't healed and completed are things you go out in the world, look at other people, transpose those parts of yourself that you're ashamed of, and take that shame, put on somebody else, and then shame them because you can't deal with shaming, or you can't deal with healing that within yourself. And it's not about shaming ourselves. It's about being in the seat, just like we go, the seat of observation. You probably heard that in spiritual terminology. Another way of saying that is like, I sit in responsibility of the experience that I'm having in this world. It's, if anybody's heard Ho'oponopono, it's also kind of caught on in the last few years. Like that whole teaching, that Hawaiian mysticism teaching is about, can you sit inside of that? If something is coming into your experience, that you're responsible for it. Meaning if women don't feel safe, not only is that individualistic woman responsible for getting that healed for herself, all the women and all the men in the world, if we're experiencing that, we're all creating that together. And I think every one of these situations is an opportunity for us to take responsibility. Trump in office and all the things he brings up for people are opportunities for us to take responsibility for things. Every gun shooting that happens in America is an ability for us to take responsibility for things. I think the unfortunate part right now is that we constantly have a dialogue coming at us that's a one-tone dialogue about how to deal with everything, which is blame it, shame it, find one person who's responsible for it, and then sweep it under the rug like it didn't happen. And then it happens again, and people are just like shocked. Well, nothing's changed. So like, I think one of the things that we work for, and many, thought leaders, spiritual leaders are working for, is like, how do we get in the process of creating a new leadership body on this planet? How do we deal with these issues in a way that's never been dealt with before, not the same way that's been dealt with for 100 years, that's created zero movement and creates nothing but frustration. And everyone else, like Elon said, I'm not even at shock and awe anymore. Like none of us are. Like gun violence happens, we used to be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. We just had the worst one in history. It's like talked about for like a few days, and then it's like nothing, no movement. So it stops being shocking and it just becomes the norm. And I think that's where a lot of it, we need to get responsible for complacency and resignation and apathy in our own, right? In our own lives, guys. Like, I think that's the thing. It's like when you start thinking about the greater issues of the planet and you think like, we need to organize, we need to get people together, we need to get people to agree, we need to do all this stuff. Fuck that. Throw all that stuff out the window. I get overwhelmed by ideas like that. And we're in the process of creating a movement behind ideas. It's like, you do your inner work. You get complete. You stop shaming and blaming these different parts of society, these different parts of humanity. You're doing the work for everybody. That changes the planet. That changes our collective and individualistic futures. I think that's the thing to focus on, is like in your inner circles with your 5 closest friends, like getting engaged and being like, dude, has this ever happened? And I promise you would go engage with men more than you think. These two included, in our own ways.
Yes.
Right? It happens on both sides. When you're a kid and it's all about safety, shit happens to you because adults don't remember what it's like to be a child and the threat of the survival at that point in time. So, I think we're all at the effect of it. I think it would be useful also for for the dialogue to be in both directions, that it really is not a women problem. It's a species societal problem. And that if we all got healing around sexuality, or focused on first chakra, second chakra healing, and again, like, think about the conversation about sex over here. It's like, it's bad, but we're going to show it to you all the time.
Yep.
You know, like that mentality, instead of seeing the creation energy of sexuality and how much of that is actually divinely connected to our ability to connect and to create. And when we shame that, how disconnected and how we can't create, and it stops being about just fucking somebody all the time, you know, and really about how do we use that energy in a way that's like fundamentally sound with the natural flow of the body. I think that's where we got to go.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a line that Paul used to say all the time, that big people do horrible things to little people without having any idea that they're doing it. And it's so true, right? Like, a lot of the times, again, this is not to get anybody off the hook. It's just to give, if you were someone who was abused in any way, shape, or form, right? There's that great line, you know, it's like you drink the poison and you hope that the other person dies, but the only person dying is you, right? A lot of the times, all the anger and the frustration and hatred towards whether it's the opposite sex or a particular type of person or whatever it is, that doesn't illuminate, that doesn't alter you, that doesn't uplift you, that's your growth and development. And I know that's really hard to hear. We did an amazing podcast once on forgiveness. And one of the things that I've seen, and this is scientifically proven, by the way, so there's a course that people can do for a week where they hook you up to all of these brain sensors, and where you're basically like trying to compute is how to get yourself into theta mode. And so they do all these practices with you to see what creates the largest theta waves in your brain. And the number one thing is forgiveness. You know, so like finding those traumas and finding those things that you're still holding on to and being able to forgive, that actually creates the most amount of light. That creates the most amount of energy in your life. So the one thing to remember is, you know, just because something like this happened to you, it doesn't define you. You are not that instant. You are not that event. The person that did XYZ to you, that's not a generalization about everyone in that population, right? And that's where our brains like to go, because that's what keeps us safe, right? If I never wanted to experience something again, right, and my brain was like, we never get to experience that again, then what am I going to do? I'm going to naturally put a protective cocoon around myself to never even be in that situation again. And in doing so let's say someone was like sexually abused, right? And I get that it might not be the most pleasant work to do. And, you know, then what? You get to live with a closed heart for the rest of your time here. You get to just harbor anger and hatred because that one person did something that fucked up. You're the one that has to live in your body day in and day out. And so as men, okay, one of the most sacred energies of the male masculine is to show up and be support, acceptance, and love for our women. As a king, that's what you get to do. You get to honor that feminine for all her glory and creative and the love and all that stuff that she is. And you just get to show up as a space that supports, loves, and accepts her, okay? So if that's what we get to show up in, how do we get to do that? So the first thing that you could do is get interested, right? I guarantee that some of you listening to this right now have no idea that the person that you love most in your life, whether it's a wife, a sister, a girlfriend, someone, you have no idea of the pain that they endured while growing up, whether mental or physical, because you just don't ask. And I get that it's uncomfortable for the women on that side to share that kind of stuff. And look, it's not your job to sit there and like pry it out of them. What you can look at is, hey, I want you to know that I'm a space for you to share whatever you need to share. And if there's anything that you're holding, that you're angry or frustrated or upset, or someone's wronged you or hurt you, I want you to know that I'm here to listen to whatever you want to say about that. Because in the sharing, in the releasing, even in saying someone's story, there is an absolute release, right? Because the story that people keep telling themselves without sharing to others, the story that they keep saying over and over themselves has been dramatized time and time again through the years to become more powerful. And just by actually saying the story, like, I can't tell you how many times I've been around someone where they actually finally let it out. You can watch decades, I'm talking in physical form, decades of aging come off their face. Mm-hmm. It's like a light gets turned back on. So if you love the women in your life, whether they're your friends or your sisters or your moms or your girlfriends or wives, like, if anything, maybe this is just a wake-up call to everyone to be like, you know what? I've never even asked the question. I don't know. Has someone hurt you? And maybe just the act of that, like, what a conversation that gets to be. And I'll give you another one. What if you just ask the women in your life, how can I best show up so I can love, support, and accept you? What does that look like for you in your life? What would I get to be in order for you to have that? By the way, this is a conversation I have with my wife all the time. All the time. Not a once and done thing, like all the time. I ask my kids this all the time. It's important to me, right? Now get this, like, here's what you're doing. So you're training people in a way that you get to communicate. Who do you think someone goes to? Why do people come to Guy and I? Because we've created the ability to be with and accept a lot. I'm not saying everything, right? Like, there's still things that like upset and surprise me, and a lot, without judgment, without making that person feel like they're wrong, that they had this. No, it's an experience. That experience doesn't define you. Who do you want to be? Okay, what's in the way of that? Great. Let's take a look at that. And that's something everyone can do.
So I think that's a really great thing. And I'd love to just offer a distinction here, one that we learned a long time ago about sustaining transformative conversations. There's a lot of reasons transformation doesn't stick, and I'm not going to get into all of them. I do want to talk about one thing that we learned a long time ago that was explained to us, like conversations disappearing. So we see this a lot, right? So we train that everything in life is a relationship. We're just relational beings, right? So we have a relationship to ourselves, a relationship to our families, relationship to money, relationship to God. And in this case, I want to talk about the relationship to word and like how we organize around it. So most people are set up around a conversation that what you say is like a physical object. So we have the relationship to word like we have a relationship to physical object. So if I have this cup over here of tea and I put this down on the table that's in front of me, right? If nobody comes and moves this thing, I can leave for 10 years, come back, and this object is going to remain in that stationary place, right? So when we tell each other like, hey, there's something I want to tell you, I love you, or your wife asks you to throw out the trash, right? And then later on they're upset and disappointed. Why is it that we get upset and disappointed? And I'm pointing to it because it's this relationship to where like it's an object. So if I tell Elon like, yo, bro, I love you, right? And I'm like, there's my cup. And then later on, Elon's having this experience where he's not feeling love anymore. And he starts getting upset because I had said that. Like, and I'm like, what are you upset about? I told you I love you, right? It's right here. Look, there's my love. And then we get all upset about that. Now, that really is not how word works. The phenomenon of word doesn't work like the phenomenon of object. The way word works is that it's like you say something and it's just like a puff of smoke. It's like you see it momentarily and it disappears. So I want you guys to notice if you're tracking this, and if you are tracking it, just like, hit some likes on there so I know that you are. If you're tracking this, then I want you to think about this phenomenon, because both the things that we do want in society or don't want in society, the things that we do like and that we don't like about ourselves and other people, notice that the things that you don't like, you don't stop talking about them. And it's that because you don't stop talking about them that you consistently recreate that reality. It's like you're shooting smoke out of your mouth all the time, right? It disappears and then you recreate it. It disappears and then you recreate it. There was an amazing interview with Morgan Freeman years ago on 60 Minutes where he's sitting there with the interviewer. There's a clip on that of YouTube for sure if you go look at it. And he asks him about Black, and the interviewer is a white Jewish man, and he asks him about Black History Month. And Morgan is like, that's ridiculous. Like, you never seen Morgan get upset before, but in this moment, he's like, that's fucking ridiculous. And the guy is really taken aback by the response. He goes, what do you mean it's ridiculous? And he says, Black history is American history. Why do we have it distinct? And the guy's like, I don't know, just the way it is. He goes, do you want White History Month? And he's like, no. He goes, do you want Jewish History Month? And he's like, no. And then the interviewer asked him, he's like, so what about racism? How do we get rid of it? And Morgan says the simplest and most beautiful response. He goes, stop talking about it. It's in the conversation of keeping it alive that puts it back into existence all the time. Like, notice how talking about race relations doesn't get rid of race relations. Calling one person Black and one person white, a child doesn't know that. Elon's children have nothing about the difference between Black and white. That has to be instilled into a person for that to exist. Those distinctions have to be created. Borders have to be created. They don't exist. Guy, my friend yesterday said to me, she goes, she was just fucking around, but she goes, you know, the horizon doesn't actually exist, but it does exist also. And I want you guys to think about that. Like, the horizon you're looking at, there's no horizon on planet Earth. It's one giant orb. And yet in our experience, there's a horizon. But if you move towards the horizon, guess where the horizon goes? It keeps moving. You don't get to the horizon. It doesn't actually exist. It's all in language. So it's the same thing here. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a conversation about things, but there's a huge difference between having a conversation to complain about what's happening. This is in your life too. Track it on your own experience. Don't track it in globally, because then it becomes like, blah, right? There's a big difference between having a conversation to let go of something, and there's a big difference between having a conversation to complain about something. So I would offer the distinction there between complaining and sharing. I'm all about sharing, because the energy of sharing is, I'm going to say this because I want to release it.
Yes.
I want to forgive myself, and I want to forgive whatever happened to me, whether it's a perpetrator or somebody else. Because like Elon said, you don't forgive, perpetrator's not living with that energy. You are. You're literally dying from the inside. And if you don't get down to the core authentic conversations that you've been holding on to, get to feel those feelings, feel right in feeling those feelings, because it's like, guys, this is your sovereignty. This is your body. When you go, you don't get to do this anymore, the body's in shame. And that shame produces results in the world. That's why Elon wants to have conversations with his wife about, like, hey, what happened? Because it's that empathy that, A, lets her release that, and B, he has awareness about it, because the last thing he wants to do is recreate more of that trauma for her, whether it's an action, word, or anything else, right? So at least that awareness gives him the ability to be like, oh shit, like, that's not an action that's consistent with the values I have with my wife. Mm-hmm. You know, and then like slowly moving away from that, even if it's an automated processy, consciousness will help you shift any programming that's inside of you, right? Feeling it deeply will help you even more so and accelerate that process for sure. So I just wanted to offer that distinction, because it's like, what are we using this conversation for? If it's to shame men, you're going to shame men into taking more of that action. As they make themselves wrong, they will repeat their old patterns, because it creates overwhelm in the system. When overwhelm's in the system, we repeat old patterns. That's what we know what to do. That's what the body does on automation, right? It's fight or flight. So it's like, we want to create an environment where it's like we can openly talk about it without shaming and creating overwhelm in the system, or we're just going to get more of what we've had in the system.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from you guys as you're listening to this. Like, what's your take on this whole Me Too and now iWill thing? What's come up for you? Are there conversations or questions that you guys have about this? I'd love to see where you guys are at with this. If I could just offer a few resources, you know, things that have really, really made a huge, huge difference. Some of these are kind of like hitting it between the eyes. Other ones might be kind of on the outskirts, but I do really think have made a huge difference as well. The first one is pretty much anything by a woman named Alyssa Armstrong. She is one of the best relationship coaches I've ever met or heard of. She has a ton of audio books, and it's basically like recordings of live seminars that she's done. She's incredibly witty and funny. It's like kind of listening to a comedy routine half the time, and super insightful. Whether you're in the dating world, she's got things for that, or whether you're in a loving relationship, whether with a girlfriend or a wife or a husband or boyfriend, whatever it is, it's an awesome listen with the other person. So Fanny and I used to take, anytime on a road trip, we would just pop in Alyssa Armstrong and listen. And it just opens the door for some incredible conversations. Like I said earlier, one of the things to me that was just so, and again, at this point, I'm coaching people for a decade, right? And men and women. And she said something that I literally stopped the audio and I was like, this can't be true. And Fanny was like, yeah, absolutely. And that was that a woman, at least once in a 24-hour period, fears for her well-being. Whether it's like, so I paused it and I was like, that can't be true. So my wife works in New York City and she's like, yeah, it absolutely is. Because as a woman, just because of your size and, she's like, there's times where I'll walk by people and I'll notice like I'm clutching my bag or I'm doing all these things. And like, men, we don't experience that. There's no like you have to be in a serious situation for you to be like, I'm concerned about my well-being right now. Right. And that to me was just shocking. Like I had no idea that this is something that women go with. Right. So like I received that input that changes my view of the world. Right. I no longer view the same thing because now I'm aware that like women are naturally at a heightened level of awareness around their safety, just normal everyday safety. So that's a huge one. So Alyssa Armstrong, if you haven't listened to anything by her, I highly recommend that. Another one is, I know this is going to sound like a little bit strange, especially if you don't have kids. I'm going to say it anyway, because I think to understand how parents trained you, even if you don't have kids yet, there's a book called The Conscious Parent. And it's just a genius way of understanding like how we as children get programmed and how we as adults program children. So those are two that just come to mind that I would love to offer you guys as resources.
Well, I think it's good to just study childhood development, mostly because we never really grow past our childhood development, or at least you could get insights into which part of your development processes you actually didn't complete. Yeah. Like that's what usually happens. We get hindered somewhere along the way, and that actually creates a cascading effect of the issues you will deal with for the rest of your life. To bring awareness to undeveloped areas is everything.
Yeah. So yeah, let me see if I think my thing froze. So let me just.
There's comments, but no. Forgiveness does the mind body good. Jacqueline said we're here to experience what we experience because no matter how dark it is, we can handle it. Love this conversation. Thank you guys. I think it's important, like any other issue on our planet. Maybe this one more than most, right? Like harmonizing masculine, feminine energy. I think it is kind of the work of our time. The feminine energies on this planet have been held down for a very long time, not just for women, but also internally for men. And that's created a lot of disharmony within our systems too. Something that's come into my consciousness is like before I was kind of investing my time in like balancing the systems, and something that's kind of become more of my dose now is like, anytime you try to balance something, you're always like this, which means you're never quite feeling good about moving forward or like stabilizing. It's more about creating harmony between the two. Before I was like, well, I want my feminine, and then I have like this choice into my masculine. Now it's like, no, they get to integrate and live together in an interdependent relationship, where before it was almost like that codependency. And we see that again in relationships all the time. When you haven't harmonized your energy, you're looking for the relationship in order to harmonize that energy. And then it becomes codependent because now that harmonization is based on that person being around. And when they're not around, you start making them wrong. You start attaching to them. You start manipulating them because you seek the energy. and you're literally putting your experience of joy and safety in the hands of somebody else.
Yep.
And then you don't feel joyous or safe because you still haven't finished and completed the development process of your own sovereignty, of claiming your own body, or claiming your own spirituality, or claiming whatever it is that you haven't fully claimed yet in your life. And it's like, guys, that you want to increase the love on this planet, it's got to start with you increasing the love over here. You can only receive and give to that amount. So it's like, if you want to have the experience of greater receiving and love all the time, like, you just have to love yourself more, or you get to love yourself. You don't have to do anything, you know? But if that's what you seek in this world, like, I would offer that's the direction to move into.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's not new information to anybody.
You actually segued perfectly into kind of how I wanted to wrap this up, which is, for any woman or man that's listening to this, and you've been abused in any way, shape, or form, if I'm sure God would agree, so I'm going to say, if we can leave you with any message, it's this: you're loved and you're perfect exactly how you are right now. And when you can see yourself that way and not look at yourself in the mirror and shame that aspect of you and go, oh, you know, if only this hadn't happened to me, I would be this kind of person. You get to choose what kind of person you are moment by moment by moment. And I'll leave you guys with this little story where this kind of really hit home for me. I was at a seminar, and this 82-year-old man stood up at the end of a 3-day event, and he had never spoken before. And he stands up and he said, "This work is the most important work being done on the planet today. And let me explain why." He was in the Holocaust. I get chills every time I say this story. He was in the Holocaust. And when he was, I don't remember how old, 6 or 7 years old, watched his entire family get mowed down. Mom, dad, siblings, and he somehow survived. So at the age of 19, he comes on a boat and gets to Ellis Island in New York. And he said, I made a choice. I made a choice that when I left that boat and I got onto this new land, what happened to me. It is not me. And he said that he consciously thought that as his heel was going to hit the ground, and by the time his heel hit the ground and his toe hit the ground, he was going to choose to be an entirely new human being. And he went on to create one of the largest personal construction companies in the Northeast. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Donated millions, tens of millions of dollars to all sorts of causes. Did incredible things. I'm not saying that you have to forget what happened to you. There's a difference between shaming yourself and blaming others for something that happened, or realizing that, yes, this is a part of who I am, and I get to choose who I want to be in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. And I get that sometimes the moments are a little bit harder, even for Guy and I, to choose who you want to be in that moment. And it's still your choice. No matter what happened to you, no one can ever take that choice away from you. Ever. No matter what happened, that's your choice. And if you need any support in shifting that conversation and finding forgiveness, in being supported and loved and accepted, we are here. We are here. Satori Prime is here. Our community is here. Whatever you need, we will be there for you. Mm-hmm. Just know that you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. You're loved. You're perfect. You're God walking this planet. And the sooner you realize that, the more impact you will get to have on everyone around you. Because like Guy said, you'll get to share that inner love now in a whole new way.
Yeah, and I just think it's important to plug yourself into communities where you get to feel free and fully expressing who you are, what's happened to you, etc. Whether it's with us or you connect with somebody else, I don't really think that matters. I think as long as there's that outlet to begin that conversation, the therapeutic nature of getting out of monologue and getting into dialogue with people and sharing that part of yourself, and then seeing that people don't run away from you. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that you need fixing. You came here whole. You're going to leave here whole. It's about remembering that you're allowed to have those sensations in the body, and it doesn't make you something wrong. It doesn't make you fucked up. And I think it's a beautiful thing to watch in our society right now, that we are cultivating communities that are allowing for greater communication back and forth about things like this that have stayed in the dark for so long. And you're helping bring illumination to it. Every single one of us is helping bring illumination to it. So I think that's a great tip.
Yeah. Beautiful. Guys, if this conversation has resonated with you, and you know someone that's dealing with anything like this, please share this, pass this along. And if there's any way that we can support them or you, again, like I said, please reach out. We make ourselves very accessible. And with that, we love you very, very much. And we hope to see you guys here in a week.
Yep. Love you guys.
Love you
Have
guys.
a great week.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.